Happy New Year, everyone. That's the part where you say, Happy New Year. I understand. We have, since the last time we saw each other, had a rough 2 months. It was not without its challenges, but we do appreciate your continued work as we continue to build and recover. And as we begin this new year, we extend our best wishes to members of the media and all present here and in the hearing of my voice as we continue. So today, we are going to be presenting highlights from the Q3 gross domestic product and the January to August 2025 international merchandise trade. And in keeping with our data dissemination schedule, we'll also be releasing the December 2025 Consumer Price Index and the October 2025 Labor Force Survey today. I need you to rest assured that we remain committed here at STATIN to our mandate of producing high quality, reliable, and timely statistics for the nation. And we look forward to continuing to work with you as we provide data that supports decision making and national development. As we get into our discussion, you will hear about the challenges that Hurricane Melissa brought to us and how we have had to adjust and overcome so that we can still give you the numbers that matter. So the format of this press briefing will be slightly different because we will be dedicating time to further discuss the CPI and LFS numbers. And we're also, as usual, going to be taking questions after the dissemination of today's results to provide a better understanding of the survey data. We'll be joined today by our Director General, Ms. Lisha Delati-Bader, as well as our Acting Deputy Director General and Director of Surveys, Dr. Natalie Simpson, our Acting Director of the Administrative Statistics Division, Mrs. Xiomara McDonald, who will be joining us to discuss these numbers. They'll also be supported by our newest member of the director team, the Director of the Economic Accounting Division, Mr. Shandar Henry, and Ms. Jessica Campbell, Director of Research, Design, and Evaluation. So to start us off, I'm going to invite the Director General of STATIN, Ms. Lisha Delati-Bader, to walk us through the key highlights. Make her welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I know you can do a little bit better than that, man. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. So today we're here to discuss the findings from the Statistical Institute of Jamaica. The GDP and the merchandise trade statistics releases that we'll be discussing today both reflect the performance of the economy prior to the impact of Hurricane Melissa. The Labor Force Survey, which also reflects conditions prior to the storm, was, however, disrupted by the hurricane. On the other hand, the consumer price indices reflect post-Hurricane Melissa conditions. Let's begin with the Q3 GDP. On December 31st, we released the quarterly national accounts estimates for the period July to September 2025. The overall performance in the third quarter largely reflected continued recovery from the negative impacts of Hurricane Beryl in July 2024. During the July to September period, the Jamaican economy grew by 5.1% compared with the corresponding period in 2024. The goods-producing industries grew by 10.9%, supported by strong growth in agriculture, forestry and fishing, mining and quarrying, manufacturing, and construction. The agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry recorded the highest growth at 20.9%, influenced by improved weather conditions. The services industries grew by 3.3%. All services industries recorded growth except for public administration and defense, which declined by 0.7%. Regarding international merchandise trade statistics for the period January to August 2025, earnings from total merchandise exports for the period January to August 2025 amounted to US $5,210.9 million, while imported goods were valued at US $5,131.0 million. This resulted in a balance of visible trade of negative US $3,920.1 million. Relative to the same period in 2024, earnings from the total export of goods increased by 1%, mainly due to increased revenue from crude materials excluding fuels. Spending on imported goods increased by 3.7% during the review period, primarily driven by increases in the imports of raw materials or intermediate goods, up by 11.8%, and consumer goods, up by 9.1%. Regarding the consumer price indices for December 2025, the all Jamaica inflation rate for the month of December 2025 was 1.3% when compared to November 2025. Regionally, the monthly inflation rate was 1.4% for GKMA, 1.1% for OUC, and 1.3% for rural areas. The main drivers of the monthly inflation rate in December 2025 were housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels, which increased by 2.6%, and this was the largest divisional increase. Food and non-alcoholic beverages, which increased by 2.0%. Personal care and miscellaneous services, which increased by 0.5%. The point-to-point inflation rate, which shows the average change in prices between December 2024 and December 2025, was 4.5%. The main factors influencing the point-to-point inflation rate were food and non-alcoholic beverages, which increased by 7.1%, housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels, which increased by 3.5%, and restaurants and accommodation services, which increased by 3.9%. Now let's discuss the labor force survey. The reference week for the October labor force survey was October 5 to 11, 2025. And data collection for the labor force survey started on the 12th of October. Now, fieldwork typically spans 6 weeks, and therefore the data collection for the labor force survey was disrupted by Hurricane Melissa, which made landfall on October 28, 2025. Generally, the results of the October 2025 labor force survey reflect marginal changes in the Jamaican labor market when compared to October 2024. The size of the labor force in October 2025 was 1,462,000 persons, representing a decline of 6,300 individuals. This resulted in an overall labor force participation rate of 67.8%, relative to 68.1% in October 2024. The labor force participation rate for males stood at 73.4%, reflecting a marginal decline from the 74.5% in October 2024. In contrast, female labor force participation rose slightly to 62.4%, up from 61.9% in the corresponding quarter of the previous year. The number of individuals outside the labor force was 693,800 persons. The increase of 6,300 persons over the similar quarter of 2024 was driven by higher numbers for males and youth outside the labor force, whereas the number of females outside the labor force declined by 5,500. Total employment stood at 1,413,200 persons, which was 3,800 fewer compared to October 2024. Male employment stood at 757,000, which was 11,500 fewer than in October 2024, while female employment increased by 7,800 to 656,200. There was a notable decline in the number of employed youth from 174,000 to 163,600. The number of persons unemployed as at October 2025 is estimated at 48,800 persons, a decline relative to the 51,300 persons estimated in October 2024. The unemployment rate, or LU1, was 3.3% in October 2025, relative to 3.5% in October 2024. This difference, however, was not found to be statistically significant. Youth unemployment decreased from 21,600 in October 2024 to 19,400 youth in October 2025, resulting in a youth unemployment rate of 10.6%. Thank you. I now hand back over to JP.
All right, so we just zooped through the numbers, but now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty and discuss further what what our DG has just shared. So thank you so much for that presentation and for sharing the latest insights with us. So I now invite Dr. Simpson and Mrs. McDonald to join me on stage as we transition into that discussion. So we're going to begin by examining a key factor that influenced the data released today, which is the impact of Hurricane Melissa. And this event has had a profound impact on communities, businesses, and employment. Therefore, understanding how it has influenced the data is important. So I am going to direct my first question to you, Leisha, which is, how did Hurricane Melissa impact STATIN's operations?
Thank you so much. So Hurricane Melissa actually resulted in disruption of our field operations, particularly our face-to-face surveys. As you can imagine, there were a lot of damaged roads, a lot of power outages, persons were displaced, and as well, in light of the fact that there was no electricity in some areas, there were some safety concerns. In fact, several of our data collection team were personally impacted by Hurricane Melissa. As you know, we have data collectors stationed island-wide. But not only our data collection teams, also our respondents were impacted by the hurricane. And in the immediate aftermath of the hurricane, we found that there was a slight uptick in the non-response as persons were adjusting mentally to the challenges of the hurricane. Nonetheless, we quickly implemented a number of adaptive measures, particularly for the CPI and the October labor force, which were the most impacted products, and we will be discussing them today in the interest of transparency.
All right, thank you. So we're going to further examine the Consumer Price Index and Hurricane Melissa's impact on that. So CEO, could you let us know what your experience was like, or what the experience was like as it relates to the CPI?
Hello, morning everyone. So let's first acknowledge that for the past couple of months, it has been challenging collecting the CPI given that we got affected by a Category 5 hurricane. So we had to adapt and be resourceful and to make sure that the CPI remained accurate and relevant, right? So we adjusted accordingly. Our field staff has been very resilient over the past few months, very resilient, and we were able to go out and go to the affected areas, at least where we could get accessibility, and for the businesses that were open at that time. So we have been reaching out also, and we have collected what we're destined to do and what we're mandated to do to collect it, so yes.
Thank you so much for your response. And I direct the same question to you, Dr. Simpson, as it relates to the labor force survey.
Check. Good morning, everyone. So for the labor force, the DG opened her remarks by talking about the fact that the reference week was October 5th to 11th. data collection started October 12. So by the time Hurricane Melissa made landfall, we were about 2 weeks into data collection. What it means then is that we had to pivot. And one of the things that we quickly implemented was an abridged version of the labor force questionnaire, which is consistent with the recommendation from the International Labour Organization on short modules that can be added to surveys. So the concepts are measured in the same way. So that was implemented in the areas that were the most severely impacted areas, so moving from St. Elizabeth all the way around to about Trelawney. What it means then is that for those areas, we have mixed questionnaires, a long form and a short form, because data collection started before the landfall of the hurricane. So once we got the data in-house, we had to do a number of assessment and quality checks to ensure that the measures were consistent and that the data integrity is of the highest standard, so the data is robust and the quality is good. What it also means is that the timelines had to be extended. So data collection and data processing went 2 weeks additional. The DG said it earlier, data collection is typically 6 weeks, so we had to go up to about 2 weeks to allow for data collection in these areas. The impact, of course, we can see in the data. There is an increased number of, like refusals, slightly more refusals in the severely affected parishes, and as well, some additional demolished dwellings. So the impact can be seen. But the assessment was done, and we're able to publish the headline indicators today.
All right, thank you so much for that clarification. And just a reminder to the members of the media here, you can write your questions. We are going to make time to hear from you, as you are, the voice of the people. And so we're going to look at the methodological adjustments that would have had to be made. So back to you, CEO. What technical adjustments have you had to make in light of the hurricane on the CPI?
Okay, so for the technical adjustment for the CPI, so normally we collect for the first week of each month, right? And we also collect for the third week of each month for the CPI. So for the first week of December and also for November, we did a 2 weeks. We extended the collection period by 2 weeks instead of the 1 week collection period. And also, we're still giving the businesses time to recoup, and also given that the fact that we'll have prices and items that are still not accessible, we apply the international standard statistical methods, class mean, imputation, that are used across the world.
Could you go into detail about what those imputation methods are?
The class, so similar items, so we'll find imputation and average for similar items, and also going to different parts that are close by to the affected areas to get the items that are not currently available at the affected, especially for the affected parishes.
So if I were to think of it in like a layman way, if the price for mackerel is not available, then a similar item would perhaps be tuna or another canned fish.
Right, or if we're, especially for the persons who might be leaving those affected parishes and going to nearby towns, they will be purchasing the mackerel, and we would also have those prices there.
Okay, thank you so much. And so I'm going to ask you the same question as it relates to the LFS. What are the technical adjustments that had to be made?
The most significant one would be an adjustment of the weights. For this particular quarter, we have 2 weights. The first one is our regular weights that we apply to the data set. And just for clarification, weights allows the sample to be representative of, or applied so that the data is representative at the national level. And so we were able to apply the weights to all of those indicators that would be consistent across the short form or the abridged version of the questionnaire and the long form. So that's the single weight that we would typically apply. For the parishes that were least affected by the hurricane, and they would have gotten the full questionnaire, there is a separate weight available for researchers to be able to do estimation of the other indicators that we are not able to produce at a national level.
So how does the latest release from the LFS affect my ability to compare to the previous one, or does it affect it at all?
Okay, so the full weights allows for the core indicators, which the DG reported on earlier. So you're employed, unemployed, outside the labor force. All of those indicators that were reported can be compared to October 2024. For the other indicators, so we're talking about our LU 3, 2, 3, and 4. For some of those indicators, you would only be able to do those estimations for the least affected parishes. So it wouldn't be fully comparable with the October 2024 quarter. Unless you are also doing the estimation for those 9 parishes, then it would be comparable. So it wouldn't be comparable with what we currently have on our website.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I follow. So I'm going back to CMR. Can you explain, with a point-to-point inflation rate of 4.5% for December, where are we seeing the major price increases?
All right, so I'll go to my figures, right? So the point-to-point standing at December 2025, we have the largest group, food and non-alcoholic beverages, increasing by 7.1%, right? And agricultural produce that have pushed that would be yam, Irish potato, and carrots, tomatoes, most of what the average consumer does use. Mm-hmm. And additionally, we had an 8.4% increase in the seafood and other fish and seafood class, and that was moved by higher prices for saltfish, sardines, and mackerel. Right, so, and then for the second weighted highest division, the housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels, we had an increase of 3.7%, and this was mainly due by a higher movement in the water dwelling, water supply, and sewage rates. So those are the top two that reflected the 4.5% increase, as at the point-to-point at least, as at December 2025.
All right, thank you so much. And this will be available in our press release, so members of the media, you can look out for all of these details in your emails very, very soon. So, Dr. Simpson, what are the trends that you're seeing in employment for the October 2025 LFS?
Okay, so let's start with the overall decline in employment of 3,800 persons. And like the DG said earlier, the unemployment rate is 3.3% compared to 3.5% in October of 2024. However, the difference isn't statistically significant. We are, however, seeing some notable declines. For instance, youth 15 to 24 years, the employed declined by 10,400 persons, and we're seeing other mixed movements in occupation and industry. So some industries moving up, some moving down. Occupation, when we look at clerical support workers, declined by 16,000 persons. Craft and related trade workers declined by 11,700 persons. Managers increased by 16,400 persons. Technician and associate professionals increased by 9,400. When we look at the industry groups, we're seeing where real estate and other business services had the largest decline of 10,400. Arts, entertainment, recreation, and other services had the second largest decline of 6,400 persons, but saw some increases in accommodation and food service activities, which increased by 7,900, and education, human health, and social work activities increased by 6,900 persons.
Okay, so what about the opposite? What is happening on the unemployment side of things? What are the factors influencing that?
Right, so in terms of unemployment, we are seeing a decline of, I think it's about 2,500 persons. So what you notice is that there is a decline within the labor force of both those that are employed and those that are unemployed. And so those persons went outside the labor force, which is the reason why you're seeing an increase of 6,300 persons outside the labor force. We're seeing some significant movements, mostly among youth, both in terms of the employed, unemployed, and the outside labor force. And just to note, typically, youth outside the labor force are in school, either
Okay.
part-time or full-time.
Okay, because I was going to ask for that clarification. And that brings me to the end of my questions that I have. I'm now going to invite general questions and any clarifications that you need from members of our audience. You can indicate by raise of hand and we will have the mic come to you. So if you have any questions, now is the time for you to raise them. Good morning.
Value-added jobs.
So you said, is there an increase in value-added
Added
jobs?
jobs, yeah.
Can you expound on?
So managers increased. There was another. When you looked at the breakdown, you saw that it was not just entry-level jobs. It was more moving up the middle tier of the workforce. Would you say there's that increase in value-added jobs in terms of employment over the period?
So in terms of, well, the concept that we engage mostly with in terms of labor force is higher skilled or low skilled jobs. So if your question is whether or not the movement is into higher skilled jobs, yes, in terms of managers and so on, and you saw the decline in like clerical support and so on. The concept of value-added jobs is not really one that is utilized in the labor force nomenclature, but if how you define it is based on skill, yes.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Okay, we have one more.
Good morning, everyone. Mahiri Stewart, Nationwide News here. I'm looking at the graphic right now and I see for the employed labor force is a pretty significant reduction for males and a pretty significant, well, I wouldn't say significant, but a rise for females. Is there any reason you could present for why you believe that may have happened?
So historically, if you look at a few quarters, even before the series was changed, you will notice that females were gaining employment and closing the gap. I think when you look at the fact that the unemployment rate is at 3.3 and the number of persons estimated as unemployed currently is 48,800, it means that where you might have a greater pool of persons to incorporate in the labor force would be among females. So you find that females are coming from outside the labor force and are gaining employment, and also from the unemployed into employment. So it is a trend that we have seen historically.
Thank you for your question. Any more questions from members of the media? Oh, we have one more.
Thank you. Luke Douglas from the Gleaner. Just a clarification. Your survey period ran 2 weeks after Melissa. Is that correct?
For which product? Is that for the labor force survey?
For all products, really.
All right, so specifically for the labor force, it started 2 weeks before Hurricane Melissa,
Right.
and continued for maybe about an additional, so it ran for 8 weeks, so maybe about an additional 6 weeks post Melissa.
Okay, so in that post-Melissa period, I would have expected a fall in unemployment as workplaces and so on would have been destroyed. Is that reflected in their numbers?
So it would not be reflected in this particular release because the reference week was October 5th to 11th. And so all the questions that we ask about persons' employment is as at that week. So if you are looking to see the impact of Melissa on employment, you are more likely to see that in the next quarter, if such exists, and the magnitude of it.
Okay, thank you.
And that seems to be all of the questions from our audience today, who have been very attentive and very I call it participatory. So we thank you for your engagement, and I thank you all for joining me here today. So Leisha, give us a quick recap of everything that we were treated with, all of the releases that we were informed of today.
Thank you so much, JP. So for the third quarter 2025, that is July to September, the economy grew by 5.1%. Exports of merchandise trade for the period January to August 2025 was US $1,210.9 million, while imports was US $5,131.0 million. The inflation rate for December 2025 was 1.3%, while the point-to-point inflation rate was 4.5%. And finally, the unemployment rate, which is from the reference period October 5 to 11, which is pre-Melissa, was 3.3%. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leisha. Thank you, Dr. Simpson and Mrs. McDonald, for being here and interacting with us here today. So as we bring this morning's press briefing to a close, I want to reaffirm the Institute's unwavering commitment to producing statistics that meet the highest international standards. All data released today have undergone rigorous cross-verification and are prepared using sound methodological principles consistent with global best practices, which ensures that the information that we provide is accurate, reliable, and fit for decision-making at every level. I also want to acknowledge the dedication and the hard work of the management and staff of the Institute. Many of our own staff members would have been affected by Hurricane Melissa and still pushed through to collect information, and that is something that is commendable. And to our respondents who, in spite of being affected, would have participated in our surveys, the kind of gratitude that we have is just inexplicable. We are also very grateful to all of the ministries, departments, and agencies that supply administrative records, which play a critical role in the compilation of comprehensive and reliable national statistics. Please remember to follow us on our social media at STATINJA, and you can visit our website for all of the tables and the infographics that you need at statinja.gov.jm, or you can send us an email if you need any clarification. We're here for you. So you can send us that email at info@statinja.gov.jm. Thank you all for your continued support and partnership. Have a productive rest of the day.